welcome to another edition of the Faithful Presence Podcast. I am your host, Reverend Michael Langer, founder and president of Faithful Presence, a ministry in Washington, D.C., equipping servants and leaders working in the public square to flourish as they participate in Christ's mission of making all things new. We do that through providing spiritual, emotional, relational, vocational, ideological, cultural, and evangelical discipleship, and supporting the local church and equipping their members for Christ-centered engagement in the public square. Boil it all down, we are all about whole life discipleship in the whole of life for the whole of the public square. I hope you've had a chance to catch a couple of our most recent guests. Dr. John Bowman of the Ciceronian Society joined us to talk about an article he wrote on intellectual discipleship and the important role that classical education can play. And then we had Dr. Stephen Presley, author of Cultural Sanctification, a Christianity Today 2024 book winner. We have many more to come. As I've said before, our new paradigm is going to be 2 to 3 guests a month, and then one podcast where I think I'll maybe just talk and maybe be interviewed. We'll just talk about current events. But today's guest is Dr. Anthony Bradley. Dr. Bradley serves as a distinguished research fellow at the Acton Institute in Grand Rapids and is the research professor of interdisciplinary theological studies at Kuiper College. He studies and writes on issues concerning fatherhood, the men and boy crisis, criminal justice reform, youth and family poverty, education policy, social ethics, race in America, and covenant theology, and he knows a lot about each one of those. He talks intelligently about them because he is a smart guy, which is why we're having him on the podcast. His books include Liberating Black Theology, Black and Tired, The Political Economy of Liberation, Keep Your Head Up, Aliens in the Promised Land, John Rawls and Christian Social Engagement, Black Scholars in White Space, Something Seems Strange, Ending Overcriminalization and Mass Incarceration, Faith in Society, Why Black Lives Matter, and one of his most recent books, Heroic Fraternities. Dr. Bradley, welcome to the podcast. How the heck are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be on.
Yeah. So you and I met, as I've mentioned on numerous podcasts in the past, that part of the reason that Faithful Presence even exists is in part because of you, and you sending me, I think must have been my second year at Covenant. You sent me to San Juan Capistrano to some Acton event, and when I see the math for the Acton Institute, it must have been in the first year or two that Acton was going, because I think I went in maybe 2005, 2006. And it was reading, Catholic social teaching, Abram Kuyper, all this stuff. And I believe you had told me before I went, you said, the kind of questions that you're asking, I want you to go to this. You're either going to come back and go, yeah, I don't understand any of that, or it's going to alter kind of the trajectory of your life, which is exactly what it did. So first of all, thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up kind of connected to Acton, almost 20 years ago now. Tell us a little bit about your theological journey, your faith journey, and how you ended up where you are.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I tell this story by making particularly my students understand the power of writing a thank you note. I'm from Atlanta originally, and growing up in the South, you just have to do that, right? It's just a thing we do in the South. You write thank you notes for anything and everything. And I remember, you sort of graduate high school, whatever, you get all these presents, and your mom's like, write a thank you note. You're like, I don't want to write a thank you note. It's like, write a thank you note, right? Write a thank you note. So I just sort of got in the habit of writing thank you notes. So when I was studying at Westminster Seminary for my PhD, I was looking for scholarship money. And this was pre-internet. So this was in the 90s. And there used to be these things called scholarship books, and you would go to the bookstore or the library. They'd be 600 pages, about the size of a telephone book. Again, I'm dating myself here. About the size of the yellow page. It was sort of that thick. And I'm just flipping through, and I discovered this organization called the Institute for Humane Studies at George Mason University. And I applied to go to a conference that they had because their conferences were free. And I'm all about the free conference. They said the only thing you have to do is get yourself there. Right? I can do that. I was in Philadelphia. I could drive down to the DC area. Not a big deal. So I drove. I drive down to George Mason. Actually, I think that first event I went to was at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, even closer. So drove down there, and it was very, very similar to your experience at the Acton conference, the Toward a Free and Virtuous Society conference. At IHS, they had this Liberty Weekend where you read all this political philosophy, you read a bunch of economics, you read philosophy proper. It wasn't Christian, but just sort of big ideas, big picture things from the Western canon. So I go, I have a good time, and I said, "Hey, I'm just going to write him a thank you note and say, hey, listen, I just want you to know that the conference was really influential for me, and as a result of the conference, I basically sort of narrowed down what my dissertation topic is going to be."
Wow.
So that must have checked a lot of their outcome boxes. So they asked me if they could use my thank you note as a cover letter for their fundraising campaign that year. And I said,
Wow.
sure, no problem. What I didn't know is they were going to use the actual letter in its entirety. I thought they were going to maybe take an excerpt, but they used the whole letter, including my address.
Are you serious? They put your address in there?
They just
Nice.
used they used the entire letter. They just
That's
copied
great.
it and put it in their little packet. So as a result, two things happened. There were people all over the country. I got all sorts of mail from people saying, hey, there's this thing in Grand Rapids, Michigan called the Acton Institute you should check out because you're a religious person. And that really wasn't a religious context. So like you can go over, they're sort of
Yeah.
like you can go over there with the religious
Right.
people who care about these ideas of liberty.
Okay.
And there were also people that contacted the Acton Institute directly and said, hey, there's a guy in Philadelphia who is aligned with you guys. You should contact him. The then president, Father Robert Sirico, reached out and invited me to the same event that you went to in Connecticut, in West Cornwall, Connecticut, at the Trinity Church Retreat Center. The Trinity Church is in downtown Washington, D.C. That's where Hamilton is buried. It's right on Wall Street. It faces Wall Street. And they have a retreat center up in Connecticut, which is really gorgeous. It's one of my favorite places to go in the whole country. So I went to the conference, and that's when I, for the very first time, had a place to intersect things that I love: theology and also political philosophy and economics and public policy. And I had never been in a context like that. I'd been in a context where you do one or the other, but I wasn't in a context where you could do both. And so the ACT Institute was a place where I could do both of those things, and the rest is history. After that, I did a summer internship there for 3 months, and then after that, I worked for them. I left Philadelphia, worked for Acton for 3 years full time, and left to teach at Covenant Seminary. That's where we met.
Right.
Taught at Covenant Seminary for 4 years, and then moved to teach at the King's College in New York City, and stay with Acton full time versus part time, off and on the whole time. So I was full time and a part time. Now I'm back full time. So that entire tenure as an employee would be, I guess, 23 years.
Wow.
I guess I've been around Acton in total for 25 years. This will be the beginning of it'll be 26 years this year.
That is just absolutely amazing. So I'm interested. Were there other Covenant students that you said, hey, you should go to Acton, that it had the same kind of impact as it did with me, where they were like, I'm going to just lean into this really hard?
There was not a single Covenant student that attended an Acton event that wasn't transformed by it. It just opens you out because you get exposure to resources and ideas and categories that in the standard sort of Presbyterian, Reformed, broadly Reformed canon, it's just not there. And one of the things that a lot of evangelical Protestants lack is a consistent social teaching to help them think about issues of culture and society. And Catholics have that. They have a Catholic social thought tradition. There's an entire arm of the Vatican that works on these things. And in the sort of typical evangelical space, you'll get a random assortment of blog posts on that site or this site, or now some podcast by this guy or that guy. But there's nothing consistent and categorical like that. And so I just found it a place where I could do those things, because it was just missing in the Protestant Reformed space.
Yeah, I came into Covenant through the John Piper side door. So I'd read, I was basically non-denom after I became a Christian. Was pretty active in the church. And at some point in the, I don't know, probably late 90s, somebody gave me a copy of Desiring God. And I read the first 2 chapters, hated it. Didn't like the whole sovereignty of God thing. Was like, okay, well, this is bad, bad, bad. And then reread it a couple years later and was like, okay, well, surprisingly, these verses are actually in the Bible. And so there must be some grid. And so when I went to Covenant in 2004, I went I went to Covenant as a soteriological, a 5-point Calvinist who thought that that is all that Calvinism was. Like, I didn't have, as you said, this redemptive historical paradigm, which, Jerram Bars and Greg Perry and Michael Williams and Jack Collins are all kind of helping you flesh this thing out. And then I go to Acton and I was like, okay, this is, first of all, why are there Catholic guys in robes here? Like, are these people even know what they're doing? Like, what is this? And then they start talking, and you're like, okay, these are really smart people. These are extremely intelligent people who not only understand philosophy and theology, but they love Jesus and they love the gospel and they're 100% committed to it. You're just having these conversations about actual things that exist in the world that are that need our attention. And oh, well, here's an article from 1,000 years ago where this Catholic priest wrote about it. And yeah, we this is not new information. This is not like, oh, the Western Church just discovered these things. Well, we did just discover them. But the idea of like faith and work and vocation and economics, all those things, we're pretty late to the game on those things. I mean, that's the embarrassing part, is we're way behind the Catholic curve. So how have you fit in to Acton? Because it is a mix of like Dutch Reformed theology and Catholic theology. How's that work for you?
Yeah. So when you think about the tradition that was birthed by both Pope Leo XIII when he wrote Rerum Novarum in 1891, and Abraham Kuyper's book that's commonly called The Problem of Poverty, also in 1891, both the Dutch tradition and the Catholic tradition in 1891 were addressing some of the issues in the changing culture in Western Europe. You had sort of a few things. Number one, there was a growing sense of atheism that was emerging. The second one was a very emergent sense of Marxism that was brand new in the West. And the last thing was the economic piece. They were really trying to both addressing that. The Industrial Revolution was fully engaged at that point and quite prolific. And so you had very very new social settings where people were becoming wealthy because of their industry, not because they were descendants of the ruling class.
Right.
And so both Kuyper and Pope Leo XIII are trying to figure out, how does Christianity navigate these very, very new Western cultural phenomena. And so in that sense, the Dutch tradition in the Reformed world does have a very, very long canon of these sorts of things. And so for someone like myself who's really drawn more to that sort of neo-Calvinist tradition, that sort of intersection for me was much more easy to do. Now, in fairness, I was also raised United Methodist. And so the Wesleyan tradition, in terms of his emphasis on the poor and justice and things like that, was also just a part of my own theological DNA. And unfortunately, this sort of standard Presbyterian Reformed, little r Reformed, uh, emphasis on the Puritan tradition did not allow for the sorts of intersections of culture and faith because the emphasis was so much on personal piety.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a key part, and I think I'd love to have you expand on this because even while I was at Covenant, I think, so this podcast listened to by people from kind of all persuasions, but people who are in the kind of in the Reform Presbyterian thing know that Covenant has kind of basically straddled two sides of the Presbyterian community. And so one of the things that I became aware of as all of these things resonated with me, and then I left to go plant churches based on this paradigm of, okay, what is it? How can we as Christians engage as embassies in the city that we're in? Somewhere in the last 20 years, the issues that you write about, race, economics, criminal justice, those types of things, they're woke, right? They're woke, they're liberal, they're progressive now. They're the slippery slope to liberalism. The Bible doesn't, encourage that. People need to get a job. People need to, do all these things. If you don't want to get arrested, don't do a crime. All of this stuff, all of this kind of language of kind of rejecting the longstanding tradition. And I know you've experienced that. How have you then, because this is where you were going, how do you make sense of how we move forward in this when embracing the very things that the Bible teaches are being cast as like, oh well, that's just liberalism now?
Yeah, I think one of the things for me at least is to not necessarily have the current iterations of ideology determine both the exegesis and the application of that exegesis to real world issues. And I think for a lot of people, unfortunately, ideology drives their interpretive lenses in terms of how they think about ecclesiology and eschatology and ethics and what the Bible means. Like what does James mean when he says that good religion is taking care of widows and orphans? Like what does that actually mean? And so there is this opening out that happens or rather can happen when you really take not just the Bible seriously, but the whole of the Christian tradition seriously. And and as you know, Christians have always been categorized by people who both love God and love neighbor. And unfortunately, political ideology right now, at least in a lot of ways, considers the loving the neighbor part to be progressive. Right, and to be liberal, to be
Right.
woke.
Yes.
Right. If a perspective is distinctly Christian, it's going to challenge both the right and the left. It's going to challenge both American conservatism and also American progressivism. And so I've tried to always situate myself in these sorts of discourse analysis with a distinctly Christian perspective. One, on the social side of keeping the human person at the center. And there's a long tradition of what's called personalism that really focuses on how these issues apply, not structurally necessarily, not in terms of ideology, but helping real people on the ground
Right.
in local communities who are struggling. So what is the Bible? What is your theological tradition? What does your church tradition have to say for or say to or do for or do with the homeless person,
Right. Right.
the drug addict, the single mom, the man who is being released from 10, 15 years of incarceration, to someone who has cancer. Whatever the issue is, you have to have some sort of framework for the application of the Christian tradition to these issues in 2025. And the Catholic tradition has that. I mean, they have, you can go to the Vatican website and you could put in any issue,
Yes.
literally any
Yes.
issue
Yes.
in the search box, and you're going to get hundreds of pages on it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And not from 2 weeks ago. Right?
Exactly.
It's like 18, what? Oh, wait. 18. Oh, we're talking about a race issue in 1903. Somebody wrote on that deeply with citing sources. Yeah, it's yeah, I show people that occasionally. They're like, "Oh, where did you get this idea or that idea?" I'm like, "Oh, let me show you this thing on the Vatican website." You're like, "What is this? Why don't we have this?" I'm like, "I don't know why we don't have it, but they do, and it's great."
Yeah,
Um,
and so for me, keeping the human person at the center and thinking about the application of the tradition to current issues sort of helps me navigate around a lot of the political ideology noise that I think too heavily influences how people think about faith and the intersection of a whole host of issues, right? Faith in work, faith in
right.
marriage, faith in sports, faith in whatever. It's often driven too much by ideology. And here's why. Now I'm preaching. Here's why.
No, please.
Because there's just such an absence of a consistent reflection on these issues that people default to political ideology because they don't have anything else to help them think these things through. And that's largely in part based on what I said earlier. The emphasis is so much on personal piety, which isn't bad. I love personal piety, but Christianity historically has been about more than that,
Right.
right? I mean, if you look at the early church, for example, it's very, very well known that Christians invented the invented childhood. I mean, it was Christians who gave the first dignity to children. It was Christians who started the first hospitals. We invented orphanages. We invented adoption. And so this is the sorts of things that Christians do historically. And because our country's so wealthy right now, we've had the luxury of letting somebody else work on those issues while we sit around and have personal Bible studies and the women's lunch and the men's retreat and the multi-$1,000 budgeted youth ministry. We take a 1 week, 10-day missions trip to Jamaica to paint a school, have some good food, things like that. We have the luxury of doing that. But the early Christians, they were poor.
Yeah.
And so the
And they were
Africans,
doing that in their own town. Like, my own town needs my help.
yeah, and so there's I can't remember the name of the theologian, but there's an African theologian who coined a phrase foot on the ground theology.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
So your theology comes to life when it hits the ground and addresses real issues that both form Christians and the person who is receiving charity and mercy. It's formative for both people. That's been the whole Christian tradition, and it sort of got eclipsed, I would say, in the American fundamentalist movement about 100 years ago. It kind of got eclipsed and got culture warish.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that culture war tradition is about now 100 and it's about 110. No, that's not fair. About 120 years old. We've just been culture warring as Christianity rather than, to use the phrase on the sign behind your head, being faithfully present,
Right.
bringing the gospel to life, theology of life, church to life on the ground with real people.
And that's so, when I'm reading Augustine and some of the early church fathers, they had this rule of faith. Like, how do we know if this theology is good? Two questions. Does this help me love God and know God? And does this help me love my neighbor? And if the answer, like if it doesn't answer both of those things, then we're not going to go down that road. That's just going to be bad theology, right? And so this was all before we systematized everything and like, oh, here's my proof text for this, and here's my proof text for that, and here's this proof text. They didn't they didn't read the Bible that way. That was inconceivable to read scripture that way to them. They were saying, hey, here's how we're going to determine what's happening. And so I remember when I wrote, so like Lindbeck, I think, talks about this in his book on doctrine, a systematic theology book. But he talks about basically the same thing. And Van Hooser is doing a lot of work on this now, too, as you know, which is trying to recover this kind of hermeneutic, how we're reading scripture as informing our life. And we can invalidate what you say you believe based on your actions. Like if I don't see this being lived out, then you just are saying words, and those we can say that's you have an inconsistent faith. So I remember when I was trying to come up with my topic for your class, I think it was an independent study. I had shared with you that I used to sell lethal and toxic gas detection systems to chemical plants, and it's what I did before I went to seminary. And so the paper that I wrote for you was, what do you do? How should Christians think about transnational corporations operating in third world countries with regard to caustic gases and toxic chemicals going into the water? And what should Christians think about? How should Christians think about the difference between, well, they need to go through the industrialization process just like we did, and right, which is like the free markets they fix it. Free markets will fix everything, and the other side, which is, well, there's a reason why we don't allow mercury to be put into the water here. Like, you will get sued and you will go to jail. But when somebody shows up in Uganda and says, I'd like to build you a plant, and the person says, well, what's happening with the mercury? Yeah, so here's the deal. We have to make a real quick trip to Zaire to offer them the same gig. And if they take it without this question, they're getting it. So should we get on the plane? I had to wrestle through, how do we think about, as a people in a sovereign nation, how do we think about what a company's doing in another nation? Because those are my brothers and sisters there. Those are my neighbors. And thinking that through is a thing I learned at Acton. Like, how do you, these are actual biblical truths. Those are my neighbors. And so I guess the question that I want to ask you is, how have you seen the work that you're doing in this area affect actual change that's happening? Like, I'm imagining that people are coming out of Acton and going back to churches or going into the public square and saying, hey, we need to have this conversation because this conversation matters.
Yeah. So I think the sort of driving principle is human flourishing. And if it doesn't contribute holistically to human flourishing, not just the flourishing of their spiritual lives, but the flourishing of their health and their bodies and their minds, of course, and their souls and their families, if you really put human flourishing as a category to measure these things, it forces a lot of questions. There's a saying we have at Acton that piety is not a substitute for technique.
Right. Yes.
And that good intentions are not enough.
Yeah.
Right. That you can have.
Right. This is why thoughts and prayers is such a wounding term, because as I say to people, prayer is always the most you can do. You can't ever do anything more than pray, but it is usually not all you should do. Like, that's the problem, is when it stops there.
Exactly. And so we have to both have a heart for helping people, but also a mind about how to think about helping them in a way that contributes to their dignity and contributes to their flourishing. So when those categories come up, people leave acting and they go back and rewrite the whole script of their organization, right? I mean, they go back and start over because what they thought was helping was actually hurting. What they thought was good was actually undermining the people's dignity that they were working with. And so for 30 years or so, we've seen people go back and completely redesign their church ministries, their nonprofits, their mercy work, their social work, their missions programs, and things like that to both form the person's soul, but also to help meet the needs that allow them to flourish and thrive as image bearers made in the image of God. So, how do we get people in a position where they're able to do the things that Genesis 1 and 2 encourages us, and I would say even calls, maybe even designed us to do? So, a great example of this that kind of helps me think about these issues is that if it doesn't contribute to human flourishing, then it's not helpful and actually could be sinful. So, for example, slavery was bad not only because it was participating in an economy of human trafficking, but it also undermined the slaves' ability and freedom to be image bearers. They could not rule and subdue and cultivate the earth when they're being oppressed by someone. We see this directly in Genesis. God's people weren't able to be the people that he called them to be while they were being oppressed in Egypt. And so, in order
Right.
for God's people to be what God wanted them to be, he had to free them from oppression. And so when I think about justice, when I think about issues of thriving and flourishing, any framework that undermines the human person's capacity to live out the vocation of being human according to what it means to be in God's image, that's how I define injustice. And so for me, I'm willing to use whatever means or resources are necessary to free people to fully lean in, as the young people say, to lock in,
Okay. Is that what they say now?
to being an image bearer,
Okay.
right? To being a person who is free to use their creative capacity to rule and subdue and to cultivate and to work. Right?
Okay.
You're not freely engaged in the activity of taking the material world and using your imagination and fashioning it in such a way that it contributes to somebody else's flourishing if you're enslaved or if you don't know how to read or if you have a drug addiction or if you're trapped in multi-generational cycles of poverty or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
If you're not healthy, if you're overweight, if you have mental health issues, all of those issues really sabotage a person's ability to be a fully engaged image bearer of God.
So you've landed us at a great place to I want to discuss two more things before time is over. The first one, you talked about image bearers and mental health and those types of things. And you've been doing a lot of work in that area recently. And I want to ask you about that. One of the things that you mentioned when I was at the most recent Acton University this summer is I went to one of your lectures and you were talking about transitional justice, right? That when we defeated the Nazis, the people who did that and perpetrated those evils were punished. And you said an example of like, oh, some poor little old man is 92 and he's got some great grandchildren and he likes to give them candy. And they find out, oh, you worked at Auschwitz? Yeah, well, guess what? You're gonna get in this wheelchair, you're gonna go to court, and you're gonna go to jail because that was a crime against humanity. And then you pointed out something that I mean, it resonated with me, and I've shared it multiple times, and that is that the sheriffs and the judges and the district attorneys who were in office during the height of Jim Crow were not removed from office when they signed the civil rights legislation into office or into legality, and that the undermining impact that that had on the people who were like, so do we get justice now? And the response was, well, you have the Civil Rights Act. So, and so, yeah, I remember thinking when you were talking about that, the mental health damage that that does. And then saying, well, why aren't they flourishing? Well, generationally, generations of, ACEs and mental health. And one of the things you've been writing about with this connection with mental health is actually like the role that fathers play, like the role of a home in actually producing people who are flourishing. Talk a little bit about that aspect of kind of generational mental wounds and the home and how these things, it's not just like, well, we need to make sure they have free access to the marketplace. There's the emotional and relational issues and cultural issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, there are two ways to think about this. There's a psychoanalyst that I'm a fan of from the 1950s named Karen Ornai. And what she argues is a lot of people get their wings clipped. That's what happens to them through neglect, through abuse, through oppression. They get their wings clipped. And so imagine this. Imagine we say, hey, we're gonna have a bird and we're gonna set it free. But before we set it free, we're gonna cut off its wings, or we're gonna cut off 30% of its wings, and then we release the bird, and we're like, hey, how come the bird can't fly? The bird is free to fly, but it's not flying. What's going on? We have provided everything the bird needs, right? The bird has free skies, access to water. There's insects and worms the bird can eat, but the bird isn't doing anything because that bird must be lazy, or maybe that bird is ungrateful, or maybe that bird is a rebel of some sort. I'm like, no, the bird just doesn't have full wings. That's what I think about it. The other illustration that might be helpful for some people is to think about an automobile. So you walk outside and your car is on cinder blocks.
Okay.
And all your tires are gone, not just the hubcaps, right? Someone came and unscrewed all 5 bolts on every tire, and they're gone. So you get in the car, you turn it on, you put it in drive, the engine works fine. It's got a full tank, no issues with the oil, all the fluids are checked, everything is great, but it's on cinder block. So you're in the car on drive and you're pressing the gas and you're going nowhere. And so people look at that and think, well, they're in the car. We gave them a car. We filled the tank. We free access to the highway. Why aren't they going anywhere? And I'm thinking, well, their car's on blocks. It's on cinder blocks. They don't have any wheels. And so if we really want to see human flourishing in this sense, we really want to talk about justice and things like that. We really want to talk about people that have experienced a lot of neglect and abuse and trauma, both personally, but even also structurally. We can't expect people who've experienced those things and their wings are clipped, they don't have any tires on the wheel. We can't expect them to sort of magically thrive. So caring for the whole person means that we care both about the car and the wheels and removing those cinder blocks and making sure the person knows how to drive, making sure the tank is full so they can go. And so for me, I want to have a more holistic approach where we're caring about both the human person, but also the context that allows for flourishing and thriving. So we have to help people heal from neglect and abuse. We got to help people heal from addiction. We have to take the cinder blocks off and put the wheels back on. We have to sort of help them grow and repair their wings so they can really fly and soar. in that way. And this is a problem with piety, because piety is concerned about the person's piety in the car, right?
Right. Yes, that's good. That's
Right.
helpful.
They got in the car and had a quiet time. Okay, we're good. They know the gospel. Okay, we're good. Right. I know, but they can't make any progress. And what about the progress part, so that it can really feedback and affirm their dignity and the fact that God has commissioned them to be people that matter and make a difference in the world.
Yeah, there've been all these studies using this ACEs test, ACEs scoring, which is just 10 different kind of traumas that can happen before the age of 18, and a dad leaving home, a parents divorcing, that's one of them. And what we know now, because and I know you know this because you're doing a lot of work in this area, that we have biometrics, we have MRI scans, we have data that says people who accumulate these, their brains function differently. Their prefrontal cortexes does not process the information the same way. They're in fight or flight mode. And then we wonder, as a society, we're like, well, why is it that they can't make a plan for getting out of this? Well, it's because their brain doesn't do plan. Their brain does run and fight. That's what their brain does. And if we put you in an MRI machine, we could prove that to you, that there needs to be a lot of therapy and intervention, and even pharmaceutical intervention, because those neural pathways have rewired themselves to, hey, I should probably, go out and buy some tires and, put them on my car and do whatever. But the person's it's like, it's not able for them. And so you've been writing a lot about what happens to boys when men leave home, and the impact that has. Just talk a little bit about that. And then I want to move into, um, kind of long-term trauma in what you're doing with your work in Exodus, because that's about a group of people highly traumatized trying to move to the suburbs, to the promised land, right? Hey man, you're leaving the ghetto, you're going to the promised land, it's going to be great, here's your new house.
There's Target here,
Right.
and Trader Joe's and Whole Foods as well. Yeah, there's I was gonna say Bed Bath and Beyond, but they went out of business.
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to make an opportunity for you to talk about these dad drive times things, but I think what I really wanted, I mean, we can go back there, but I do think it's helpful for you to talk about this is what was so impressive about your work, the new Bible study that you have, devotional on Exodus, because it covers spiritual, emotional, relational, vocational, ideological, cultural, and evangelical formation, which we care about a lot. Like you're talking about, these were people who were highly traumatized and knew nothing about their God, and they had to learn it. And so talk about your work in Exodus and how you're using that to help people connect all of the things we've been talking about through that study.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is, I got this from two people, mainly Reinhold Niebuhr and also Karen Ornai. One of the things that Reinhold Niebuhr says is that anxiety is a precondition for sin. And that what happens is, we feel a sense of uncertainty. We are afraid of the possibility that something bad might happen. We either will do two things. Number one, we'll trust God with that, or we'll try to trust ourselves and fix it ourselves. And if you look at the entire history of Israel in the book of Exodus, that's what you see. When things got rough and things got hard, where did they go? There were some moments where they trusted God, but when things got really bad again, they were worshiping idols.
Right.
Right. And that's exactly what we do today, is that when we feel anxious, when we feel discomfort, when we feel like the world's out of control, when we're around surrounded by chaos, when things don't make sense, etc., we're either going to trust God with the mystery of that, or we're going to try to take the reins or grab the steering wheel and try to fix it ourselves. And that, Niebuhr says, is a precondition for sin. Now, what's really interesting is that one of the best protective interventions for the onset of an anxious spirit, I would say, or an anxious disposition, is a very stable home. That anxiety begins in the home, and that a child's central nervous system, in terms of this flight or fight modality, is completely, and I'm going to use a strong word here, determined and caused. We started using causal language about this in 2013.
Right.
Is really caused by the experience that kids have with their parents. And so
Yes.
fathers have an incredible role to play in intervening against this sense in a child's mind that the world is a dangerous place. It's a
Right.
big place, and I'm a small person in it. And the father's role is saying, no, 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 no. God's made you and called you and formed you and shaped you. And when you do what God says, and when you really trust God, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. God says this to Israel repeatedly. I will be your God and you will be my people, which is a signal to them to say, you will be fine. I got this. Pharaoh, don't worry about him. I got it. I got it. Right? If you trust me, you'll be fine. And so what do? They half trust him.
That's
They
right.
trust him for like 15 minutes, and then when their circumstances are great, they go back to idolatry, which is the human condition in 2025, right? When things are going great, hallelujah, praise Jesus. When things are going rough, oh my gosh, I got to do something. And it
Yeah.
is because I'll say it this way: what is it that tempts us to idolatry in the first place? Well, it's simply this: that we're looking for something to protect us from either some real or perceived negative outcome or evil.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? So if you don't believe that God will protect you, then you're gonna say, well, I need to find something else. Maybe it'll be money. Maybe it'll be a job. Maybe it'll be moving to a different neighborhood. Maybe it'll be XYZ. So I'm going to invest in those things because those things will give me the sense of safety and satisfaction and thriving and comfort that I really, really need. And so in the book of Exodus, if you look at it through the lens of anxiety and the lack of trust in God, you begin to see the cycles of Israel's struggle. But that's also the same cycles that we have as well. We're not any different than them one iota at all. It is out of our own sense of uncertainty and doubt and confusion that we're very, very tempted to not trust God. And what we see beginning in Exodus for the rest of the canon, particularly in the cycles of Kings, First, Second Kings, and Chronicles, it got so bad the prophets had to come and remind them to trust God with the uncertainty and the doubt, in spite of, or rather in light of, all of the oppression and the trauma and the abuse and the neglect. The question is this: can you trust God with those things? If you believe that you can, then you'll have a much better life. If you try to solve those things yourselves, not only are you going to sin, but you're probably going to end up with an addiction.
Yeah.
Right?
And I
That's
think
sort of where that goes.
the thing that I think that the church is I think, and this is why one of the reasons why I think your work is so helpful, as is Chuck DeGroat. There's a bunch of people writing in the space. I appreciate your kind of more theological take on it, and that is that the church has to wrap their brain around the fact that yes, is there a therapy culture kind of vibe? Sure there is. We can go overboard on everything. But the reality is that people who have been highly traumatized have a really hard time making the right decisions. And then we blame them for it. And then they feel like, oh, I guess I can't go here to this church because, like, look, I can't get my life together. You write, and this is where I want to connect this. You write in the introduction to your book. You write, at Mount Sinai, God reveals himself to Israel in a powerful and awe-inspiring way. He descends upon the mountain in fire and smoke, his voice thundering across the landscape. He gives them the 10 commandments, a moral compass for their lives, and establishes a covenant with them, a sacred agreement that defines their relationship with him. This covenant is not just a set of rules. It is an invitation to a deep and intimate relationship with God, a relationship that is based in love and trust and obedience. And then you go on to say, we will see how he desires to dwell among them, to guide them and to bless them. And we will learn that true covenant relationship with God is not about following a set of rules, but about living in a way that reflects his character and love. And when I read that, I think one of the notes that I made for myself was how hard that is to do. And when you're not a fully formed disciple, the majority of my adult life, including time as a minister, trusting God and then doing it myself and taking over and saying, okay, I guess I'm going to have to do this now. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with wait for it, anxiety disorder based on my childhood trauma that I actually started to make some progress. So this is real stuff. Like we look and we wonder, like, why are the disciples not, why did the Egyptians make a golden calf so quickly? Oh, you mean the Egyptians who had their children murdered and right and were being beaten regularly? You wonder why they did that? It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, why is it that in Exodus the Israelites thought they had it better during slavery because they didn't know where their meal was going to come the next day, right? Why were they so afraid? It was just fear. It was just anxiety. And I've often said to people that it's much easier to trust that Jesus died for your sins than it is to trust that God cares about you.
Right.
That's
right.
way, I mean, yeah, Jesus died for my sins. Yeah, but does God love me? Does God care about me? Does God want what is best for me? And right when God gives the 10 commandments in Exodus 20, what he says, the reason I'm doing this is so that you don't sin. Like I actually want you to be great people. This isn't just something, this isn't just a bunch of don'ts. Like it's characteristic of how much I care about you, that I want you to be the great people that you are called to be because you're one of my own. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you become those people.
Right. Including letting you walk for 40 years while you learn it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do whatever it takes, even if I have to sacrifice my own son. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make sure that you become the people that I want you to be. And will you trust in that? And what happens is the situations in life at any given moment of the day, it's just like a pressure cooker, and it's a faith test. Right? Am I going to trust God in the midst of uncertainty and doubt? Am I going to trust God? Am I going to trust God with the future when the past has been terrible?
Yeah, that's right.
Am I going to trust God with the future when the past has been painful and chaotic and disordered? Do I have enough trust in God with the future? And so Israel struggled with that the entire book. They really struggled with trusting God with their present and their future, given the fact that their past was what it was. And so they thought, man, I think we were better off when we knew, at least when we were oppressed, we knew when the next meal was going to come. This like having to depend on God every day, all day. I'm not comfortable with this, right? And so they acted like that. And God had to remind them repeatedly to come back, to come home. Like, I got you. I care about you. I love you. I'm going to defeat your enemies. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to restore you. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that you're going to be the people that I want you to be.
Yeah, the thing I really appreciate about your study in Exodus is this theme of anxiety that you talk about. that these are people who had a lifetime, generational lifetime of learned anxiety, right? They learned, when you talk about anxiety, like, oh, what are you afraid the worst thing's going to happen? Yeah, because it almost always does. For the last 400 years, the worst thing that could happen did happen. Oh, what's the worst thing that could happen? Where you can murder all your children? Yeah, that happened. Like that's the worst thing that I can imagine happening is the thing that's happened. And now I'm gonna leave. And what you told me is, well, this is the God and he loves you and you should just obey him. Um, yeah, that's really great teaching there. Um, I I got 400 years of lived experience that tells me that's not the way that works. Horrible things happen all the time.
And
And
it's not just that one generation has this experience. It's that every successive generation has heard the stories
right,
of how bad it was. And they can see in the lives of people the impact that it had on them. And they don't want that. Who wants that? And so when you say, hey, listen, I know it's going to be hard, but just trust God with it. Like, yeah,
right,
uh,
okay,
I'm gonna need some help, right?
right,
Right. Help me with my unbelief. Help me in my unbelief.
right,
Right. And that's a consistent narrative in the entire canon, is that God also gives his people the capacity to believe and to trust. That is also a grace and a mercy. And there are times where we need to ask God, help me in my unbelief, help me trust, help me believe, help me listen, help me be patient, help me wait on you to do whatever you intend to do. That's a very, very hard thing for people to do. And let me tell you, I'll just be honest, I get it. Right? It's rational. And unfortunately, what a lot of preachers have done in the past is they've shamed people for struggling.
right. Yes, that is exactly correct. Didn't you hear the message? You heard the message, right? God set you free. He rescued you out of Egypt. Now go behave.
Exactly.
How come you're not behaving? Do you not believe God set you free? He set you free, so go behave.
Right. And so
And
they're
not that
very
you shouldn't, not that you shouldn't behave, because that's why you said it in your introduction. Like, I'm giving you these rules so that you will be the people that I want you to be. That those two things can be true.
yeah, and these are for your good,
Right.
right? These are actually for your good. And if you're willing to open yourself up to the fact that I love you and care about you, then you'll be okay with a little mystery. And Americans don't do that. Westerners don't do mystery. We don't do mystery.
We had to reschedule this podcast. We were supposed to record it yesterday, recorded it today, and you said, "Oh, I had to go to this event." And before we recorded, you were telling me about this finding that he had about how to avoid poverty, and the three components of that. You want to share it because it seems like it connects here. When you read the book of Exodus, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to give you some rules for how to live life that'll be helpful for you. Like, you should do these things. They're really helpful." And then we're like, "Well, we don't really need the Bible." Tell a little bit about this study.
Yeah, it's called the success sequence, and it focuses on really data informed realities that if a young adult graduates high school, has children after marriage, and has a full-time job, they will never be poor. And we have the data to back that up. If you drop one of those balls, you're probably going to end up poor and struggling with poverty for a very, very long time. And on the surface, it sounds really simple, right? Yeah,
Right.
graduate high school, have children after marriage, have a full-time job. But what if you don't have any executive functioning skills?
And this is where we're
What
connecting it.
exactly? Right? What if you've been so traumatized by abuse in your past that the neural pathways in your brain are so distorted that you don't do authority really well. So you get a job and then you get fired. What if you have impulsivity problems? Your God is your stomach, right? So you were hypersexualized as a child because of your abuse. Now you're someone who is post puberty, and one of the things that you do to numb anxiety and confusion is sex. Impulsive sorts of sex
Right.
that leads to pregnancy. I mean, what if you were raised in a neighborhood in a school system that was horrible? You were socially promoted. You actually don't know how to read. I heard a story yesterday about a man from Detroit. They socially promoted him through high school. He had great grades, like A's and B's, but he was completely illiterate.
Yeah.
So if he graduates from high school with a 3.6 or whatever, but then can't know how to read, he can't get a job at McDonald's or Target or whatever. He certainly can't get a job at Amazon in the warehouse. He can't get a trucking job. He can't even do the trades if he doesn't know how to read. And so thinking again about the whole person is really important, even if we think about the success sequence. Because as easily as we as middle class people say, well, here are the things, right? Graduate high school, got it. No kids until I'm married. Okay, got it. Full-time job, got it. Easy. Well, this is what middle class people do as a norm. And so it's easy for them to take advantage of those very, very three basic pillars. Rich people do it all the time. But if you come from deprivation, if you come from trauma, if you come from oppression, those are really, really hard. Now, here's what's fascinating. What happens if we treat those people with the same grace that God treats us?
Yes.
Because
Right.
what God did not do with Israel is give up on them, even in the midst of their anxieties and their struggles. He would rebuke them, correct them, but also build them back up and give them all the resources that they needed in order to thrive. And that's the sort of disposition that we want toward our neighbors. And so whenever I perform weddings, I'll tell the couple, one of the things I'll say, sort of the benediction, is what I want for your marriage is for you all to treat each other in the same way that God treats you. To have the same affection and orientation toward each other in the exact same way that God has affection and orientation towards you. If you do that, you'll have a great marriage. And if you want to think about the success sequence in terms of those three things, I could also make the case that if you just follow the 10 commandments, you'll never be poor. I'll go a step further and say if you just follow the book of Proverbs, you will never be poor. In fact, you'll probably have a great marriage and you'll be a great parent. You'll be a great worker. You'll be a great boss. You'll be a great entrepreneur if you just follow the book. Just do what Proverbs says. You don't have to do the whole rest of the Bible. Just do what Proverbs says, and you'll be fine. So instead of reading Proverbs on these issues, people go and read Jordan Peterson, who says exactly what the Proverbs says. In his 12 rules of life, he says, don't lie. I'm like, I think I've heard that one before.
And that's why these guys get a huge platform, because as we were talking before the show, there's no air in this space right now, right? The Christians have not, so this is what faithful presence is about. I've said on this podcast, it is spiritual. Church will say, well, we do spiritual discipleship. We do really well. And then we do missional discipleship, spiritual and evangelical. And when I talk to pastors, I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you're doing to deal with people's emotional development. What does that have to do with discipleship? How about their relational, the way they interact with? What does that have to? Vocation. How about vocation? How about ideological thinking development? How about cultural discernment? We're focused on Jesus here. We're focused on the gospel. focus on these things. And this, what you're saying, all of these study, everything we've been talking about is that you cannot delete out emotional formation in caring for a disciple and saying, hey, you know what? You need to get a job. I'd love to get a job. But like you say, I'm triggered every time my boss looks at me because that's bad. Okay, well, you know what? That person doesn't need more Bible study. That person needs emotional formation, relational formation. Oh, I just rescued you out of Egypt. Why don't you see work the way you're supposed to see work? You mean because I was owned for for generations? My work was owned. You don't. Why do I not have a good view of vocation? Well, I've never experienced it, and so for the church to have to say, okay, making a disciple is actually a lot of work. It's actually about caring for the whole person because the prefrontal cortex is messed up, and that's not a Bible study fix. That's
Absolutely. And I'll give you a really short example of why this is important in terms of fathers and their daughters. So what the research shows is that girls who don't perceive themselves to be really close to their dads will actually enter into puberty twice as early as girls who feel close to their dads. And so what happens is that girls who aren't close to their dads they're 50% more likely to enter puberty before the age of 12.
and you're talking about biological puberty, not I perceive myself now. I'm 8, but I'm going to act like a 13-year-old. You're talking about actual biological. I know because I've read some of these same things. This is actually, it's hard data.
Yeah, this is data. Their body responds to the neglect and or abuse, right? So guess what? When a girl when she enters puberty at the age of before the age of 12, she actually gets sexualized. And so these young girls start to actually flirt. They become sexually aggressive. They become sexually open. And when they're with often their peers, 15-year-old, 16-year-old boys who are in the same train wreck themselves, they get together and then she gets pregnant. Or even worse, the 26-year-old youth pastor
Right.
takes advantage of her. So there was a long tradition in the Protestant world where if a girl got pregnant in high school, she would have to walk up in front of the church and repent for her sin. And if when I read the data, I'm like, no. The dad should go up and he should repent because he dropped the ball. Now, I'm not saying that
You're going to get letters here. You're going to get letters, right?
Right. I'm not saying they don't have volition. I'm not saying they don't make choices. I'm not saying that they aren't sinners themselves, but neglect and abuse can pour gasoline on the sin.
That's right.
Or
that's exactly correct.
Or in a healthy context, it can actually tap the brakes on it. So you're either forming your children in such a way that you're tapping the brakes on what the enemy's trying to do by the way that you love them, or if you're neglecting and abusing them, you're pouring gasoline on it. And so why are we surprised that a 16-year-old who has no close relationship with her father is substituting men and boys to fill that emotional void, and that leads in adolescence usually to sex and pregnancy? So caring for the whole person has multi-generational implications. So we can't just have the men's Bible study on Wednesday morning at 6:30, which is great, by the way. It's great.
Right.
I love the Bible. I love Bible studies. I love coffee. It's great.
Yeah. All those things are good.
Yeah, we can't just have the annual men's retreat weekend. We have to be forming the way fathers father the whole time.
You're talking about the difference between necessary and sufficient, I think. right?
Absolutely.
Right?
Right.
Those things are important. They're necessary. They're nowhere close to sufficient,
They're
right?
not. They're not. They're not.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just
Which
not
is what the
enough.
prophets were saying. You say you believe this. That's great. That's fantastic. Hey, guess what? The demons think the same thing. So you're going to want to not end your affinity for biblical truth with what the demons believe. You might want to like keep going.
Absolutely. And there's some things that demons don't do, namely live according to what the scriptures actually say. So James makes this really clear that faith without works is dead. Right? Jesus is often rebukes the Pharisees. Didn't you read? What are you doing?
Yes.
You'll know what they believe by their works, by what they actually do. And I think that we have to. I mean, there's a lot. We could have a whole nother podcast on the world of Gnosticism.
Oh yeah.
Right.
We should have a whole nother
We could have a
podcast.
long one on that, because that's part right. We sort of see this unbiblical bifurcation between our souls and our bodies. And so there's a whole area of the Christian tradition coming out of the fundamentalist movement that believe that, well, you just need to minister to the soul, not the
Right.
body, right? Because the body's going to burn up in the fire anyway.
Yeah, this is like 3 more podcasts actually.
Right?
We're
Yeah.
doing good.
So you have to talk about eschatology, because eschatology drives so much of how you understand what faithful presence means.
Yes.
Ecclesiology,
I agree.
right? Ecclesiology determines what you mean by faithful presence. That ecclesiology and eschatology drive everything in terms of Christian practice with theology on the ground.
Yes.
And what's been, to sort of bring it full circle, what's been so tragic is that instead of eschatology and ecclesiology driving those things, we've let politics do it. We've let politics define our eschatology, right, and our ecclesiology, and then we use that to interpret the application of the scriptures. And I'm saying, let's just remove the politics off completely.
And look at how good that's gotten us. Like, look at where we are now. It's working really well. We are so close to the post-millennial dream of Christianizing everything. It's just, which is a whole. So, Anthony, so first of all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You're right. We need to do another one of these. I failed to mention in your bio that you're the newest member of our board of advisors, and it's something you've been doing anyway, because this whole thing exists in part because you sent me to this place. And then I thought, well, being a pastor is great, but like this thing here, this is necessary. So first of all, thank you for that. Thank you for this. Thank you for faithful presence and all the things, all the work that you're doing on Acton. So you have this new workout. Tell us the name of it. The Exodus study, and people can get it on Amazon, get it everywhere, right?
Yeah, the name of the book is God at Work, Loving God through the book of Exodus, Loving God and Neighbor through the book of Exodus. It is on Amazon. You can buy 10,000 copies if you like and distribute them to all of your friends and family. It is a study guide. And
Yes.
it's designed to walk you through the passage and just ask some really basic questions. You do not need to be a theologian to do this or be an expert in biblical studies at all. You can do it with your family, a small group, whatever. It's really designed to be accessible to everybody.
Yeah,
so
it's really good.
That's really the work there. And I really do, as sort of a last thought here, the reason that I organized it the way that I did is so that people do take anxiety seriously and to think about how it works in their own lives.
As part of my story, it was super helpful for me, just very, very helpful and affirming. What are you working on? What other things are you working on? You're a scholar and a fellow, so I know you're always working on something. What's your most recent project?
Yeah, so I just delivered a book manuscript called Dad Deprived. So I'm looking at the implications of dad deprivation and fatherlessness in the lives of kids along various different variables from mental health to poverty to juvenile delinquency to early childhood development, education outcomes, employment, and things like that. So dads matter a lot. I've said that dads are the most important men in any community anywhere, and I will stand on that till I die. And this book is a compilation of all the data that I've been looking at for the last 3 years on fathers. And each chapter has recommendations for both churches and nonprofits and how to help and how to support fathers so they can support their kids regarding all of these issues.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's it's a critical need. It's a critical need for the church. I'm really really thankful that you're doing that. You have a publisher for that. Like we're gonna see it. It's good to go.
Yeah, it is the contract with Baker Books. The release date is November 16th of 2026.
Really? Wow. Okay. Because they want to they don't want to they want to make it its own blockbuster. There's some other blockbusters probably coming out, so they're like, let's push to 2026, and we just vacuum up the market, all the money.
Right. So there's a whole marketing ramp up for it as well. So look for that as a Christmas present to the men
Okay.
in your life in November of 26.
Yeah, and if you guys, so a lot of you will be familiar with Anthony. Those of you who are not familiar with Dr. Bradley, he is on most of the major social media platforms. But the place where you can really get the full Dr. Anthony Bradley vibe is on Substack. You are crushing it on Substack with great articles on what is going on, especially the fathers and boys. All of that work, all of your research is making appearances there before this book. So check out Dr. Bradley on Twitter. And are you on Facebook?
Not really.
No, not really. Okay. I know
Well,
you're on Twitter.
yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. I basically only post things that I publish on Facebook. I don't really do a
Okay.
lot of interaction there. Yeah, it's just
Okay.
too muddled and too confusing for me. I'm too old.
Okay.
Too many buttons
Well,
and things to click and colors and
I,
stuff.
I
Twitter or X is just clean, but
okay.
Facebook's just got too much going on. So I walked
I
away. So
couldn't agree more. Dr. Bradley, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us.
thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it for this episode, this amazing episode of Faithful Presence Podcast with Dr. Anthony Bradley. You can check out his book. You check him out on Substack, on X, on all the different social media places. Certainly be praying for him. He's doing important work in important areas. And that also comes with a certain amount of backlash, including backlash from the church, which we have a tendency to occasionally eat our own young, even our own intelligent young that care desperately about the church flourishing. So certainly keep him in your prayers. Thank you so much to Andrew Brinkman, to Josie Reisinger, to some of our new staff members, Jen Ilchishin, who's joined as our director of partnerships, and Nicole Ritkers, who's our ministry assistant. Thank you to everybody who's listening to this. You know all the things you're supposed to do about liking and promoting and re-tagging and doing all those things. So do those things, but most of all, may our Father in heaven make you one, as He and His Son are one, so that, notice the purpose clause, so that the world will know that He loves them and sent His Son for them. Go now into the public square in a posture of faithful presence. Bye now.